Good afternoon, student. I will request all the students to write your name, enrollment number, your college from where you are enrolled in the chat box. This is for your attendance purpose, so please give your details in the chat box. Uh, Today we are going to start with the neurophysiology of brain and memory. So before starting with the neurophysiology, I would just like to explain few parts which are very important for you to understand the physiological phenomena of how the brain works. So if you can see, I am showing you the picture of a brain. This is brain. Before coming to brain, let me just give you a little bit introduction of the human nervous system. Usually human nervous system are of two categories, under which comes the central nervous system CNS and another comes the peripheral nervous system PNS. Under central nervous system, you people are aware that we study regarding brain and our spinal cord. So these are coming under the central nervous system of human. And under peripheral nervous system, there are two separate branches. One is the somatic nervous system, another is the uh, peripheral PNS. Under PNS ANS, uh, and under ANS there are another two subdivisions of somatic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So this is the basic structure of your nervous system, human nervous system, uh, under which we are more exposed. uh, mm, the main part of the nervous system under which you are going to mainly learn is about central nervous system. Central nervous system of basically are of two types. One is of brain, another is the spinal cord. If we talk about the brain, brain is the most important part of human survival. When we are aware of our surrounding, when we are aware of ourselves, when what we are doing, we are presently into the condition to understand what is going around us or the conscious level is just because of our brain. Brain is the main organ of a human nervous system who plays a very important role to carry out any kind of functions which human do, and under which there is a very important part. There are various, you can see this is a figure of a brain. It has shown various kind of features and parts. Each of these parts has a very important role in your memory or your cognition functions. Last class we have already dealt with cognition, understanding cognition. So brain is the most important part where the cognition takes place, and all kind of activities under cognitions such as memory, forgetting, learning, intelligence are all specified function of brain. If you see the figure, this is a human brain figure, and there are various parts which are showing, which you can see from this figure. Each of this part has certain roles on brain. Usually we know that brain can be segregated on the basis, this is a sidewise brain figure. If you divide brain from the front portion, you can just divide it into two hemisphere, right and left. Other than that, you can also divide brain onto the lobe, which uh, takes part in various kind of functioning. Usually the front part of the brain, the frontal lobe, has the main activities of your uh, cognitive functions. The main frontal lobe is mainly the area um, in which the main majority of cognitive activities takes place. It is usually one of the important area of the brain where any kind of damage can lead to hampering of your cognitive ability. Means if you get any kind of injury in this frontal lobe part or the front area of the brain, it hampers your cognition function, such as there's a loss of memory, new memories are not made, usually we are in the tendency of bad coordination of our muscles, there we have low intelligence level. So lots of problem can resurface if the brain frontal lobe has any kind of injury or it has any kind of problems. So frontal lobe, other than that, the brain are further divided into different lobes such as parietal, temporal, and or occipital. Each of the brain's lobes has their own specified function, but when we are dealing with the cognitive psychology, we have to understand the areas of the frontal lobe are mainly specified for doing any kind of cognitive actions. The frontal lobe is mainly located just behind, right behind our forehead, just in the frontal part, where all kinds of important activities usually takes place. A frontal lobe is the larger part of the brain and it covers the majority area of the brain. So therefore, on the basis of function, it has lots of many important functions which it carries out from every for every human being. It is also related to our other high level functionings like voluntary movements, means the movement which are under our control, that's movement are called voluntary movements. They are also being done through this frontal lobe. Multiple steps of remembering to do any particular work are done by our frontal lobe. Means if you want to make tea, so if the process of making tea step by step is completely learned and remembered by this frontal lobe areas, and it will help us to retain them when we are making tea for the second time. And it is also a very important area of speech and language. Language is a very important part of cognitive psychology. It helps us to express ourselves. So therefore speech and language is also a very important part of your frontal lobe functioning. Attention, concentration, attention are one of the important activities of cognitive psychology, is another very important function which is carried out by our brain. Working working memory implies memories in which we are able to retain our knowledge or retain our memory for a short time, and it the whatever the functioning takes place during that short time is carried out by the frontal lobe. The reasoning, cognitive reasoning is a very important part which is been done and understood by the frontal lobe. The organization and planning of any human being, means whatever planning we do to carry out or execute a program is and also we organize our particular program. Whatever organization and planning is required to carry out for a particular program is done through our brain frontal lobe. If we talk about problem solving, another very important part of our cognitive psychology, the ability to solve problem is mainly carried out by our frontal lobe. It is also very important portions which help us to carry out our emotional functioning. But emotional functioning, we will not be dealing with it because it's not a part of cognitive psychology. And also it includes all our impulse control, behavior pattern, and everything is mainly majority of the work, as the area of the frontal lobe is much larger compared to other lobes. It does lots of important other functions. If you can see, there are various areas of the brain which does lots of important work. Among them is one of very important areas is the hippocampus. Hippocampus, if you can see under this figure, it is here located in the uh, inner folds of the brain, and especially it is located in the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe, four lobes under which temporal lobe under which the hippocampus mainly uh, remains over there. Hippocampus has a very important role in our cognitive psychology, especially in the formation of our brain, and it is a very important part of. There are two important part of this uh, temporal lobe, that is thalamus and hippocampus, and so but the hippocampus is the area where the majority of the brain functioning takes place. If we talk about the word hippo word is usually very common in Greek. It means horse or a campo. Actually, it is a resembled to the seahorse structure, which is carried on over here. And here, due to the shape, it is known as a hippocampus area, which is usually the word comes down from Greek word, which means a horse, a seahorse like structure. That's why it is known as hippocampus. It is very important. Hippocampus has a lots of important functioning. Especially it is a part of all kinds of function. uh, Not only cognitive function, it has also other functions of emotion, uh, feeling, all this. But hippocampus is a very important part of formation of memory. There are usually hippocampus takes place usually for two important types of formation of memory. One is a declarative memory, and another is the spatial memory. What is declarative and what is spatial memory? I would just like to highlight that declarative memory are those related to the facts and events, especially when we learn how to memorize speech or lines in a play. So it is basically related to a event like functions, where we have to learn something and we have to completely say the word of the learned material. So it is basically when we are doing any kind of rehearsal for a play or a movie, or when we are doing a complete learning of a poem. So it is basically where hippocampus usually takes place. Uh, and this all these functions are under the control of hippocampus, and they are mainly channelized and worked in these areas. Next, if we talk about uh, the spatial relationship memory, then it is basically spatial involves the path or the route. For example, we when we are driving to a particular areas of our city, we don't have to remember, or we don't have to usually put on the GPS every time, because it has been located in our spatial memory. It has been adjusted and fitted, means the common route which we use every day, like the area, the route of our school, of our home. So that doesn't need to be repeated or remembered every time when we are walking off, or in our schools or in our home. So it is basically the spatial memory. It's mainly stored and mainly complied in the hippocampus areas, which help us to retain the direction of the area or the route which we use every day. And when we are into a new city, or when we go for any new areas, when we travel in a new areas, it takes for us on a trial basis to try the area or the route for at least 2 to 3 times. So it helps us to retain the memory by hippocampus, so it get fitted into those areas of the brain. So when you are traveling for the fifth or the sixth time, you doesn't need to ask or refill your memory. It will simply be stored and be easily retrieved if you are traveling in that same route in the same area for multiple number of times. If we talk about these areas, or if any kind of brain study, we have to understand the various kind of injury which usually takes place in a brain. And when our brain has been hampered through any kind of injury or damages, we have to understand that there are usually lots of problem takes place in human activities. Brain is usually the one of the important most part of the human activities. So any kind of activities, um, any kind of injury or any kind of problems which takes place in the brain will hamper our day-to-day activities. Few of them examples are like injury to the brain due to any kind of accidents, or due to any kind of injury due to any kind of uh, accident form, like you got injury while in a, it can be a major accident on road, it can be simple accident in home, whatever it is in a form. If the brain is injured in any form, if we talk about the severity or anything, we have to understand that our what part of the brain which get affected due to this kind of accident will hamper the functioning of the brain. For example, if it is in the frontal lobe, then all the cognitive actions will of course be hampered. Like if there is any injury in the hippocampus, then our memory losses will be very much be implied. Another very important difficulties which we face, or any kind of problem we face, is disease. There are lots of diseases of the brain which affect the brain and its function. Among them, we are very much commonly known names as Alzheimer disease, amnesia. So if any kind of this kind of disease which takes place in our brain, it will hamper again those areas which has been affected, and it will also hamper the coordination of the function of those part of the brain. Another very important function hampered by the brain is called, commonly known as amnesia, where there is a loss of memory. This amnesia can be for a temporal basis or for a permanent basis also, where there is a huge damage in brain tissues and brain functioning, which help us to forget our memory, and does not help us to retain our old memory. Alzheimer, I have always, as I have talked, that Alzheimer is a very common disorder or a disease. Nowadays, people are familiar with it. It is usually where there is a the person loses his memory, and especially he doesn't able to form new memories, and usually short term memory is completely hampered in Alzheimer. There can, if any damages occurred in these areas of hippocampus, um, there are mainly the short term memory is quite affected. Other forms of brain being affected or being uh, you know uh, getting injury can be like high stress disorders, any kind of stress disorders like PTSD, post traumatic stress disorders, or any kind of brain uh, abnormal disorders like high grade abnormal disorders such as schizophrenia. And also, if the brain is in a constant motion of depression, depression is also very important activities. If the brain faces depression for a very long time, then the parts of the brain get damaged, and due to this damage we always have problem in cognitions, memory, forgetting, intelligence, attention, all these factors. Another very important areas of brain injury or brain problem is epilepsy. Epilepsy is a very common disease, medical disease, where there is the brain is affected, and if the frontal lobe or the hippocampus is affected through this disorder of epilepsy, then again there is a loss of cognition powers, lots of memory formation, and lots of attention problem, which takes place if we have epilepsy. Dementia is another condition of the brain when there is a loss of uh, uh, forget forgettingfulness is much higher. There is no retention of memories. Dementia is mainly a common disease in older age, where people loses conditions of the brain. There are weaknesses in the tissues, or there are poor functioning of the brain activities, which leads to forgetfulness, which leads to loss of retention of memory, leads to poor activities of our cognitive activities. Now we are going to talk about memory and brain retention. Uh, Memories, I have already in the last class told you that brain has a is a majority of the part which takes place, where all kind of functioning usually takes place, especially the cognitive. We talk about the cognitive functionings, but retention of the brain is very important. It depends on of certain factors which help us to retain our brain stored memory easily. Among them uh, are clues. There are certain clues uh, when we try to restore our uh, memory for a particular purpose. We always look for a particular clue. The clue is one which help us to bring the memory very quickly back for a particular event. So if the clues are very clear when we have stored the memory, then if those clues come back to us, it will be very easier for us to understand any kind of or retain any kind of memory. Another very important function of uh, retention of memory is, especially if it is in a form of language, um, which are understandable and which are known to us. Sometimes what happens when we try to store our memory, it can be the language which we are receiving the message have to be very common, which is which we know and which we understand. So understanding is very important. So it is very important for us to understand the material so that we can uh, easily come back to uh, where we can easily retain our memory. So understanding a material is very important. Another very important part is to understand the language in which the message has been conveyed. Another very important functions for our retention of memory is duration or the time or the uh, rehearsal method. We have already talked about two types of rehearsal in the last two class of elaborate and maintenance. Both are very important functions which help us uh, to retain our memory. Both are in a, if we carry the process in a proper steps, both for elaborate maintenance and both for our maintenance rehearsal, both will be completely done in a procedure in form, then we can understand that it is easier for us to store the memory from short term to long term memory. So it will be a better way if the DSL is taking properly in a scientifically or in a step by step form. Then you can see that it will help us for us to easily retrieve the memory when required. And lastly, when we talk about the retrievation of the memory, very important part of memory is the activation of the brain. If the activation of the brain is hampered due to any kind of reason that I have already mentioned, due to any kind of disease, disorder, injury, accident, then the retention of the memory will be completely hampered. So, if for any kind of memory to be retained during the time of need, must be related to the clues, or it must be related to the important messages which help us to store the memory, or it have to be a level of understanding or the language which takes place. That's why it's very important. And also lastly, the activation of the brain is also very important for us to um, learn or understand the memory. I have almost completed this chapter. I will request the student that if you have any question regarding this topic, so that you can start sending them. So I will be have the opportunity to discuss it with you. So I will request all the students to write your question in the chat box. Yes, I have started receiving the question. One of the question I have received is explaining the Hebb's law. Hebb's law is not there in your syllabus, but just for as you somebody has written to know about the Hebb's law. Hebb's law usually is he was a especially a neuroscientific law theory in which he has tried to put more effectiveness on the synaptic part of the brain. If the, your you people have only the brain functioning, neuro functioning of the brain, the uh, neuron is another completely a different topic. The structure of a neuron is basically I just try to explain it to 1 to 3 lines. So because Hebb theory is not there, and again Hebb theory is completely a different concept. Usually, neuron is the smallest structure of our nervous system. It is basically it connects all the neurons and help us to transmit messages from the sensory organs to brain, and brain to all the sensory organs, as well as to our different motor activities. Uh, One of the smallest part of this neuron is the synapse, the area, the completely the ending part of the neurons, the terminal metal under which there is a synapse, and there is a synaptic cleft between the two starting of a neuron. Usually, this cleft uh, is a very important area which help us to transmit various kind of neural impulses, and these neural impulses are carried on by a chemical known as neurotransmitter. So at the end of this part of the neuron is the synapse, and there are two portion of synapse. One is the first neuron is known as presynaptic area, and the second one which received the message is known as postsynaptic area. Hebb, in his book in 1949, usually has given how this synaptic transmission can be more made more easy, or you can understand, or it can be increased so that it helps in the process of memory faster compared to the normal situations. So it is basically he has made uh, his principles that how the neural transmission, especially the synaptic portion, can be made into more activation areas so that it help us to carry on of our stimulus activations. Again, somebody has asked me to explain the two types of rehearsal. Again, rehearsal is a very important part in the memory formations or the storage of memory, in which the memories are being connected or sent from short-term memory to long-term memory. Usually, there are lots of memories in the short-term condition, short-term memory, which usually stays for 30 seconds. But if we require those memory to be transferred to long-term memory, and it to be need to be stored more than 30 seconds or have to be stored for a much longer time, what we do is we try to use a method called rehearsal. Usually, there are two types of rehearsal which takes place help us for the memory to be stored from short term to long term. Is elaborate memory. Another is the maintenance rehearsal. Elaborate rehearsal usually is when we try to understand the meaning of the stimulus, when we try to learn the stimulus by understanding the meaning of those stimulus, then it is called elaborate rehearsal. In maintenance rehearsal, what usually happens is that we try to repeat the stimulus many more times so that it moves from the STM to LTM. Like when we keep on learning the tables which we have learned in our early times. Remember, when we were childhood, we used to mug up the tables 1 into 2 like this every day, every time, so that it is stored safely from our LCM to LTM, and which can be retrieved back during our examination time. That is when we are repeatedly learning a particular stimulus. For in a childhood, the stimulus was like tables. But in elaborated rehearsal, what we do is we try to understand the meaning. Once we understand that in 2 times table we are just multiplying each with 2, then we will able to understand that we don't have to mug up, then we can just multiply them and start doing much more stronger sums or much more complicated sums, because we have understood the procedure of doing those sums. So to understand a stimulus, to find a solution to a problems, by understanding what is the cause of the problem, why the problem has started, deep thoughted problems, then we use elaborated rehearsal, which help us for transferring of STM of messages from short term memory to long term memory. Any more questions? Okay, somebody has asked regarding the speech disorder. I think speech disorder is completely different. Speech itself is a completely different uh, meaning. Usually, there are two speech and languages. Speech is when we try to make the child when the child try to explain or express anything, we can say them as speech. And language is when we both expression and meaning, that will be your language. Speech disorder is completely different. There are many issues regarding this speech disorders takes place. And yes, of course, the cognition function is very important in speech. The child's ability to understand meaning, to understand words, to express them when required is very much important in a brain activities. So therefore, there are in speech disorder, damage to brain, difficulties of brain functioning can make you the child can have some kind of speech disorder, but not, I can tell you, but not only sole brain activities is responsible for any kind of speech disorder. There are other physiological activities are also there. Maybe neurological problems can take place. Sometimes the formation of tongue or mouth or the vocal cord, or there are lots of many other functions which can again be a part to explain speech disorder. But yes, of course, brain cognition is also very importantly related to speech disorder. Okay, somebody has asked for parts of the brain. Okay, parts of the brain is parts of the brain means when we talk about the brain, if you see or read through any brain has lots of structural compositions. So all this structural composition itself has lots of activities, because brain is the most important part of a human working. And whatever work we do, whatever coordination we do, whatever awareness we are sitting on, this is completely done by our brain. So parts of our brain includes that we can divide brain to various positions. If we, for example, if we sit straight, we can divide the brain into two hemisphere of right and left. If we want, we can divide the brain from the side portion of lobe, four lobes I have talked about, or we can also divide them on on frontal brain, midbrain, or the hindbrain, like this portion. Each of the brain has lots of parts which has various kinds of activities which takes place. Among this, today we were as we were talking about the cognitive functions of the brain, or we are dealing it with the cognitive psychology. We have read mainly the majority portions which deals with the cognition functions. Among them was the frontal lobe, the front part of the lobe, which does the majority of the cognitive function. And another portion which we have done is the hippocampus, which is situated at the ending part of the brain, or the hindbrain, which is also a very important carries a very important functions. Among which we have done is a two types of memory, that is the declarative and the spatial memory, which are being completely done, or which has been completely uh, helps to takes place by our hippocampus. And there are also other parts which have there are other parts of the brain, but they do other kinds of functioning, not keeping itself only to the cognitive functions. Any more questions? আচ্ছা স্যার। হ্যাঁ, আমি কি পরের ইউনিটটা স্টার্ট করব বলছেন? আচ্ছা আচ্ছা, ঠিক আছে স্যার, হ্যাঁ। Okay, student, we are going to start off with the next unit also, unit 4. Just few seconds. Just in the last class, this is your unit 4. It deals with the various models of memory. This is the model which we have already done in the last class. So I would just again like to repeat myself with this model. So if there is any question, you can start off with this portion. This is the Atkinson shifting model, which I have already explained in the last class. You can see that how a memory is transferred from long to short. This is the external stimulus, talking about all kind of stimulus which are we are surrounding with. This is the sensory memory or the sensory register, in which the all kind of extraneous stimulus comes into, and see if the mainly the portion which we find is important, we send them to the short term memory. In short term memory, if there is a elaborate and coding like this is the rehearsal portion. If we do it, then it is in the long term memory, and when required for any other purpose, we try to retrieve them back in a short term memory, and we respond or we try to uh, find solution to a problem. So this is the Atkinson shifting model in the year 1968, which has they have tried to explain that always external stimulus, various kind of impulses try to come, and that is passed to our sensory register. It can be like hearing, visual, touch, anything. And I have already mentioned that if it is visual, Sperling in 1960 has said it remains there for half a second. And if it is in the auditory stimulus, it stay for 4 to 5 seconds. That is Darwin et al. In the year 1972. When we require this informations, it is there, and we do lots of work in it. If it is for our importance, it is passed to our STM. STM, the memory stays there for 20 to 30 seconds. STM is also known as working memory. And we have already, I have said that Millard has already said the storage capacity of STM is usually 2 to it's 7 plus minus 2, and it is basically through the process of chunking we can increase this capacity of our short term memory. And when we do rehearsal, elaborate, or when we do maintenance rehearsal, this messages or the stored information of the STM is passed to our long term memory. Long term memory has a very big um, capacity. It can store lots of information. It can be stored for days, months. The duration is not specified. It is usually in a very big form, and basically the messages which are stored are all of two types I have already mentioned. That is episodic memory, another is the semantic memory. These two concepts or the two names are being mainly highlighted by Tulvin in the year 1972. Episodic memory mainly remains the how we try to store memory in a form of an episode or a life event. And in semantic memory, we usually store memory which help us to deals with concepts, strategies, language, meaning. This is all under our semantic memory, and the messages are stored in long-term memory in these two forms. Other than that, now there is additionals of lots of different types of memory under your long-term memory. That is the declarative memories or procedural memories, uh, which are being done, which are more upcoming and recent researches done. Declarative memory, uh, as that which can be talked about or verbalized, means when we are using language to explain any kind of memory. And in procedural memory is basically uh, in how to when we are storing the memory in a form of a experience, and when we are trying to solve a much bigger problem, means that when we are trying to understand the meaning of that particular memory. This is mainly your procedural memory. And procedural memory are mainly help us to do any kind of problem solving activities. Declarative help us to do explain our feeling, our expression uh, to another person or to any particular requirement event, either in form of verbalized form, that is by talking or by usually giving messages like this. So this is the model which is this is a very early model of procedure of processing of memory, and this is how Atkinson and Schifrin has explained their model in the year 1968. And the main basic of the memory storage or memory formation is our encoding, is our storage and retrieval. Based on those three concept of encoding, of storage and of retrieval, Atkin Schifrin has given this model in the year 1969, which they have said encoding is where we are trying to keep the memory, or we are trying to receive various kind of stimulation. That is in the first stage of his model, where there is a external stimulus always coming, and when there are so many external stimulus, but among them we select those which we are which will be required by us. So it is mainly the encoding. After the sensory register, it is the STM is mainly where our both STM and LTM is the storage part of the procedure, in which the memories are stored. In a STM it is very for a very short duration of 30 seconds, but in long term memory the durations are not fixed. It can be for number of days time, and it can be for also for years or for lifelong. Here is the storage factors or the uh, storage activities. And if we talk about retrieval, it is seen in short term memory. It remains for 30 seconds, and the retrieval have to be within that time, otherwise the message is usually forgotten or it is lost. But in long term memory, only after rehearsal takes place in short term memory, elaborate or maintenance, then they are transferred into long term memory. There the retrieval is again very important. It can be you can retrieve memory whenever you required for your day to day activities. It will be retrieved, and it will be first sent to the short term memory, where the activities for the purpose of the retrieval will be solved. Here all kind of messages in a long term memory are safely stored, and they are in different form. Usually Tulvin had mentioned two of declarative and semantic, and further with upgradations and new researches, procedure memory and procedural memory, new forms of memory have been introduced in LTM. Tulvin, it was in the year uh, 1972, and further researches in 2002, 2000, like Abbott and Houghton, they have introduced declarative and procedural memories. They are also all common, in which there are various form. These are various form in which memories are stored in long-term memory. So I'm just because of the time constraint, I'm repeating this question. If anybody has any question from this STM, LTM and means Atkinson model, you can just ask me, so that in the next class we have another three models. We will be just moving on to those three models. If anybody has any problem in this Atkinson model, you can tell me or write them in the chat box, so that again we can in the next portion we can move on. স্যার এই কোশ্চেন থেকে কোনো কোয়েশ্চেন আসলে একটু বলবেন। স্যার এই পোর্শনটার থেকে আমি নতুন কিছু স্টার্ট করছি না, বিকজ অফ দ্য টাইম কনস্ট্রেন্ট। কেন পরের যে আছে ওটা একটু বড়, সেটা আমি শেষ করতে পারবো না। তো যদি কিছু কোয়েশ্চেন থাকে তাহলে আমি সেটা নিয়ে নিচ্ছি। ওকে ওকে। তাহলে কি স্যার আমি বেরিয়ে যাব? ওকে। ওটা স্যার আমার জানিয়ে দেবেন তো? হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ। ওকে ওকে, ঠিক আছে স্যার।